Because most of what we have was written down by clerics, much of extant medieval poetry is religious. The chief exception is the work of the troubadours and the minnesänger, whose primary innovation was the ideal of courtly love. Among the most famous of secular poetry is Carmina Burana, a manuscript collection of 254 poems. 24 poems of Carmina Burana were later set to music by German composer Karl Orff in 1936. Examples of medieval poetry. Old English religious poetry includes the poem Christ by Sinnerwolf and the poem The Dream of the Rood, preserved in both manuscript form and on the Ruthwell Cross. We do have some secular poetry. In fact, a great deal of medieval literature was written in verse, including the Old English epic Beowulf. Scholars are fairly sure, based on a few fragments and on references in historic texts, that much lost secular poetry was set to music, and was spread by traveling minstrels, or bards, across Europe. Thus, the few poems written eventually became ballads or lays, and never made it to being recited without song or other music. Medieval Latin literature. In medieval Latin, while verse in the old quantitative meters continued to be written, a new, more popular form called the sequence arose, which was based on accentual meters in which metrical feet were based on stressed syllables rather than vowel length. These meters were associated with Christian hymnody. However, much secular poetry was also written in Latin. Some poems and songs, like the Gambler's Mass from the Carmina Burana, were parodies of Christian hymns, while others were student melodies, folk songs, love songs and drinking ballads. The famous commercium song Gorde Masijic is one example. There are also a few narrative poems of the period, such as the unfinished epic Ruad'Lib, which tells the story of a knight's adventures. Topics: Carmina Burana, Cambridge songs, Goliad, Hiberno-Latin, Gregorian chant Dies ira pang lingua, medieval Latin poets St. Ambrose, St. Thomas Aquinas, the arch-poet, St. Bernard of Cluny, St. Bonaventure, St. Columba, Dante Alighieri, St. Hildegard of Bingen, Rabanus Maurus, Paul the Deacon, Petrarch, Peter Abelard, Peter of Blois, Thomas of Celano, Walafrid Strabo, Walter of Chatillon, Chaucer. Medieval vernacular literature. One of the features of the Renaissance which marked the end of the medieval period is the rise in the use of the vernacular or the language of the common people for literature. The compositions in these local languages were often about the legends and history of the areas in which they were written, which gave the people some form of national identity. Epic poems, sagas, chansons de gesta and acritic songs were often about the great men, real or imagined, and their achievements like Arthur, Charlemagne and El Cid. The earliest recorded European vernacular literature is that written in the Irish language. Given that Ireland had escaped absorption into the Roman Empire, this had time to develop into a highly sophisticated literature with well-documented formal rules and highly organized bardic schools. The result was a large body of prose and verse recording the ancient myths and sagas of the Gaelic-speaking people of the island, as well as poems on religious, political and geographical themes and a body of nature poetry. The formality which Latin had gained through its long written history was often not present in the vernaculars which began producing poetry, and so new techniques and structures emerged, often derived from oral literature. This is particularly noticeable in the Germanic languages, which, unlike the Romance languages, are not direct descendants from Latin. Alliterative verse, where many of the stress words in each line start with the same sound, was often used in the local poetry of that time. Other features of vernacular poetry of this time include kennings, internal rhyme, and slant rhyme. Indeed, Latin poetry traditionally used meter rather than rhyme and only began to adopt rhyme after being influenced by these new poems. Romance languages: Old French Trouvère, Anglo-Norman literature, Roman de la Rose, the Matter of France, Chanson de Gesta, Paladin, Charlemagne, Charles Martel, Saracen, Chanson de Roland, Garin de Montglain, Dune de Mayence, Huon de Bordeaux, Renaud de Montalban, The Matter of Britain, King Arthur, Camelot, Chivalry, The Matter of Rome, Roman d'Alexandre, Roman de Troyes, Roman de Thebes, Ennies, Troilus and Cressida, Provençal Troubadour, Courtly Love, Provençal Literature, Catalan Ozias March, Ramon Lull, André Eufebia, Italian Dante Alighieri, The Divine Comedy, Petrarch, Spanish Juan Ruiz, El Cid, Galician Portuguese João Zorro, Martin Codax, Pio Gomez Cherinho, Authors Wace, Création de Troyes, Marie de France, Guillaume de Macaut, Jean de Meng, Christine de Pizan, Germanic languages, alliterative verse, Beowulf, Elder Edda, Younger Edda, Skald, Scop, Medieval English poetry, Middle English, Geoffrey Chaucer, The Canterbury Tales, William Langland, Piers Plowman, Everyman, Sir Orfeo, Book of the Civilized Man, The Pearl Poets, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Medieval German poetry, Minnesang, Walther von der Vogelweide, The Nibelungenlied, Medieval Greek poetry, Acritic songs, Digenis Acritas, Song of Armorise, Medieval Celtic poetry, Welsh Aneurin y Gododin, Taliesin, Clywach Hen, Daffod ap Gwilym, Irish metrical Dincentius, Laborga Bala Erin, Tain Bo, Quailnga, Contention of the Bards. See also Irish poetry.